big flip here for Florida State in a position.
Huge
position of need. Extremely talented Florida State lands a commitment. Big flip. Javion Hilson, a 4-star defensive end. D-Lou, this is a nice pickup here, obviously. One of the top edge players in the country. I'm going to bring up his profile here from 247 Sports. But on the composite, a top 10 edge rusher, just specifically from 247 itself, a top 5 edge rusher, number 4 in the country, top 50 player. Man, I thought this was massive the other day for Florida State. And like I was saying earlier, a position where you're wanting to kind of build your own, and just to have this. And, I think immediately too, FSU Twitter is like, let's just wait till we get the signing day and make sure Florida State brings them in. And I understand that. And I'm right there with you. That's how, the staff should be held to that standard, because we've seen some misses here as of late, specifically in this room. But for right now, if Florida State can hold on to this cat, this is a really special player that they'd be bringing into their edge rusher room.
I'm real excited about this one.
Hey guys, it's Terrence Mann. You're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. Go Noles.
Hey, what's up? This is Peter Ward, a.k.a. P-Dub, in the house. So we're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. Go Live, go Noles.
Hi, this is Charlie Ward, and you're listening to Hear the Spear, Go Noles.
This is Terrell Buckley. You're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by No Game Day. No Bloody.
But perhaps better known as the greatest corner to ever step on a football field, Deion Primetime Sanders.
Great Deion Sanders, my brother. What's going on, man? I could wake up to that greeting every day, man. That was awesome.
Hello, Noles fans. This is former Seminole Derek Brooks, and you're listening to Hear the Spear, presented to you by Noel Game Day.
James Wilder Jr. What's going on, James?
Thanks for having me on. FSOD, Florida State or Die, and go Noles.
William Bar None Floyd.
Gentlemen, what's up?
What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoelGameDay.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday evening, an hour early, as we get in here before Florida State tips off against Miami. VZ's got some work to do and doing live coverage there, so I want to make sure he has enough time to be covering Leonard Hamilton, which is having a turnaround kind of season at the moment. We'll see what ends up happening this evening, but would be a big time win against a pretty decent squad. And the Hurricanes, also too, Cleveland. I know, VZ, you'll probably bring it up here in the end before you hop out of here, but
for sure,
a reunion there that should be pretty interesting to watch. So I'll definitely be tuning in after we get done with the podcast. But we got a ton to cover this evening. We're going to talk Mike Norvell and Alabama, Alex Atkins, and the suspension there with the NCAA penalties. After that, we've got a handful of current Seminoles signing with the Battle's End. We're going to talk Daryl Jackson, as that was announced today, and a few other Seminoles, including a graduate assistant actually moving on and finding a job elsewhere in the SEC. And then a handful of other Noles that we'll be mentioning with Battle's End, and some recruiting as Florida State just continues to take players from Alabama after Nick Saban's retirement. But with me this evening is Austin VZ, our lead basketball writer at NoelGameDay.com, and down below is our editor-in-chief, D-Lou, Dustin Lewis. Gentlemen, how's y'all's week been? How are we feeling? Seems like things are kind of starting to try to slow down right now as we head into the latter half of this January.
Slow down. Feels like it's still speeding up, but definitely been a great week, obviously, with Florida State being able to retain Mike Norvell, and you just continue to see these transfer announcements, and now Florida State doing some work on the recruiting trail. So, no slowing down into January. And so far this month, it's been pretty much all positive news for the Seminoles.
For the most part. Obviously, we'll get to the sanctions here in a minute, but it won't slow down until probably February, if we're being realistic.
Yeah, no, with the transfer portal, all this kind of stuff going on, and then NIL, we do a lot of coverage there, specifically for guys getting retained with the Battle's End. Coverage doesn't stop, and so it's all over the place. And definitely when you've got a big tier program like Alabama, where you've got current players on that team that is stacked in a lot of different ways with depth, and then you've got incoming recruits as well, making their decommitment from Alabama. it seems like Mike Norvell and at least Florida State right now is finding a lot of leadway and getting some of those guys over from Tuscaloosa. So we'll be mentioning a few of those guys and discussing that in just a few. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, feel free to hit that like button, subscribe so you get notified every time we release a new episode. And also, too, we're out there on the ground getting recruit interviews as well. Some of these transfers coming in, too. So we're posting those on our YouTube. So make sure you get subscribed so you get notified every time we release a new episode. Mike Norvell is not going to Tuscaloosa. He is staying in Tallahassee. He has signed an extension with Florida State. We saw this coming, but it seemed like after Nick Saban decided to make his commitment to going ahead and retiring from college football, now it's opened up a lot of doors for some potential candidates, and Mike Norvell was one. We kind of were discussing a tiny bit of it later last week, but it was still very early on. But after a while, some of the other candidates started flying out and weren't maybe interested in taking on Bama, and Mike Norvell became one of the hot names there. And sure enough, Alabama did get in contact and try to work something there with Mike Norvell, but Florida State, Michael Alford really pushed in. And I think from what we heard from Mike Norvell, we'll bring it up here in a minute, but he wants to stay in Tallahassee. Mike Norvell agreed to a new 8-year contract that will pay him for more $10 million a year. Gentlemen, just first off with that, Mike Norvell is getting paid, and I think, Dustin, you and I specifically just seeing all the just different intricate things that he does inside the program from behind the scenes, he's worth that and probably more.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Norvell is worth everything to Florida State. And I mean, can you just imagine the kind of blow it would have been to Tallahassee, where after everything that the program has been through, during the last 6 or 7 weeks, and then on top of that, you end up losing your head coach to the school that essentially snubbed you from the college football playoff. I mean, this city, the people around Florida State would have just melted down. So, I mean, obviously it was a huge priority to keep Mike Norvell here in Tallahassee, to keep his staff, and to keep building Florida State back to the top of college football like we've seen these past 2 years with the program. I do believe, there was a real interest there between Mike Norvell and Alabama, but you've got to credit the administration at Florida State for nipping this in the bud, getting that contract extension for Mike Norvell, committing to more resources off the field and recruiting for the Seminoles. And, the future in Tallahassee looks very bright with how things have gone as of late. And, there was no losing Mike Norvell.
This was a Jimmy Sexton special if I've ever seen it. His client at Alabama retires. His client at Florida State gets extended. His client at Oregon gets extended. His client at Texas gets extended. And his client at Washington goes to Alabama. So he put on an absolute clinic, got a whole bunch of people paid like we all expected would happen. And we don't need to tell you how important it is to keep Mike Norvell. He's very obviously so important to, like you said, the culture of Florida State, the culture in Tallahassee that's now been established. And he's deservedly so one of the 5 highest paid coaches in college football right now, and you can make the argument he's the 3rd or 4th best head coach in college football. There's only 3 coaches that are sitting that have won a national title, and Harbaugh's likely about to go to the NFL to get you down to 2. So it's just Kirby and Dabo left, and after that, it's a wild race for that 3rd best coach or 3rd most established coach. It's a well-deserved extension for coach.
I think it says a ton about just how committed Florida State is right now in the football world to be paying Mike Norvell a salary like this. You think back to a couple years ago whenever Jimbo Fisher left for Texas A&M. This is essentially the salary and contract that he got from the Aggies, $10+ million per year. And now Florida State right there paying that to Mike Norvell. They've got the renovations ongoing in Doak Campbell Stadium, the construction starting on the football-only facility. Things look extremely promising in Tallahassee right now moving into these next couple of years.
And I love that they rewarded him on the back end, because if you remember during COVID, he gave up part of his salary to help fill the athletics budget. So I'm glad they're giving it back to him here in the back end.
And one thing, too, about Mike Norvell, I had some worrisome there later on in the whole situation where Alabama, they weren't finding someone that was willing to take on that job, and Dan Lanning said no, and that's where I was like, oh, okay, this gets a little bit more interesting. And the reason why I think Alabama would be so intrigued in bringing Mike Norvell in is because of the game plan that both him, the administration, and Michael Alford put together with just, putting more money, allocating that to what they think is going to be bringing the football program up, but also off the field, that staff there that has been deeply important in a lot of different ways, specifically in that transfer portal, making Florida State one of the best teams and programs to have success in that portal. And it's alluded into bringing some great success onto the field as well, and a whole lot of other things, and just recruiting tactics and building that whole staff off the field. And that's something that I think, you saw Alabama do that first before everybody else, and what Nick Saban did a phenomenal job at. And, that's kind of what Florida State has done. And we've heard from Derek Ray, Florida State's general manager. He's one of those roles that is one that they took away from, Alabama, the idea there that you could bring in some more people off the field to kind of fully focus on those concerns and building the program up on the outside of things, not just only solely focused on high school recruiting. And that's been so successful. And that's why I was like, okay, a little bit of, okay, let's keep a very close eye on this, because Alabama, and just seeing what Mike Norvell has been able to do with what he had to work with right off the bat, and obviously seeing what he's been putting out onto the field, he becomes a really hot candidate for coming in and taking on a job of that self. But yeah, this is what Mike Norvell had to say too regarding his extension with Florida State. He said, "We came to Tallahassee 4 years ago, and it was a life-changing experience. Knowing the great history, tradition, and expectation has guided our staff on a daily basis. It has been an incredible journey these last 4 years, and I have fallen in love with this program, the university, and the people who I get to represent. I am so excited to continue our climb to push Florida State back to the top of college football. We are committed to being our best on and off the field while helping develop our players to be their best in every area of their lives. I'm incredibly thankful for the amazing commitment into our student athletes and staff from President McCullough, AD Alford, and the Board of Trustees. # keep climbing and go Noles." So Mike Norvell really happy to stay in Tallahassee. And I don't think it took too much for Alford to talk him into saying, hey, we're wanting to keep you here at Florida State. I think what Mike Norvell has been able to do, it's a lot of work in it to where he is now. And Alford, I trust that guy as Florida State's AD, and also ended up being where Florida State's allocating more money into the program itself and to recruiting too, some more money there in the budget.
And you've got to think Mike Norvell has bought himself a ton of goodwill at Florida State with the way that he's really helped this program rise out from one of the toughest stretches, if not the toughest stretch ever in Tallahassee. From where this program was when he took it over in 2020 to how stable it is now. Not only on the field, but also the culture that has been established, the amount of players that are graduating or earning academic honors. His impact goes way further than what is just being shown on the field on Saturdays. So it was imperative to keep him in Tallahassee. And, I think replacing Nick Saban, that's not going to be easy for anybody. And you're instantly on the hot seat if you have one bad season over there at Alabama. I think things are a lot safer in Tallahassee. He's obviously locked down now, well past 2030 on a really good salary. And, there's potential for him to definitely win a national championship here in the next couple of years at Florida State if everything keeps rolling in the right direction.
I was just about to say that when you're going to Alabama, it doesn't matter what your name is. You're instantly known as the coach that followed Nick Saban. Mm-hmm. And if you go 10-2, even that's a down season for those fellas in Tuscaloosa, and that's a ton of pressure. I'm not saying Mike couldn't do that, but that's a ton of expectation to, even if you miss the 12-team playoff once, you're instantly on the hot seat. You get a little bit more leeway in Tallahassee, I think.
Yep, and now it's on to Kalen DeBoer, former Washington head coach. Best of luck to him. I couldn't imagine how much – well, I can't imagine it, because now we're seeing the floodgates open there on Alabama's side on just both high school recruiting and the transfer portal, and a good handful of those guys coming over to Tallahassee, which we'll talk about in just a few. But best of luck to him. I think he's a great head coach. I think it will take a little bit of time. Alabama fans are going to have to actually have to slow down a little bit, and they're not used to that whatsoever. And best of luck to him. And there's going to be some griping, but that's the coach that I think would do well. Him and Dan Lanning, Mike, those guys have such a high future, and what they're doing, both recruiting, portal, in-house, culture, everything. So play calling, yada, yada, yada. Those are some really strong candidates. So best of luck to him. Just glad I'm not in that spot. That would not be easy.
I think what we're seeing right now is more proof of how bad college football's calendar is, because for most people, the transfer portal is closed. For Alabama, it didn't even open until after it closed, and it was a new coach in the building. I'm not personally against it because Alabama needs their downtime. They've been at the top for too long. I think they're set to come crashing down to reality a little bit, but it definitely is pushing that narrative that I agree with, that the college football calendar absolutely sucks.
It's going to be fun to see how it goes because, not a ton of Southeast recruiting ties for Kalen Dobert and that staff so far. We'll see how he's able to put it together, once he gets that full staff together in Tuscaloosa. But right now, seeing a bunch of guys hit the transfer portal, actually just saw a notification come through on my phone. Caleb Downs officially in the portal now, and I would assume that's someone at Florida State they're going to kick the tires on because he would definitely be worth the investment. But Florida State has landed 5 players from Alabama out of the portal already. Some guys on the recruiting trail backing off their commitments. It's going to be really interesting to see the total fallout from this Nick Saban retirement.
Well, with that being said, there was some really great news there, and FSU fans were already dealing with the roller coaster there because they already didn't want Mike Norvell. Once Nick Saban retired, no matter what, FSU Twitter started freaking out, and then it got worse when Dan Lanning said he wasn't going there. But then celebration, Mike Norvell's staying in Tallahassee for a very long time, got a great extension. Then bang, out of nowhere, NCAA comes in and says, F you, FSU fans, we're going to start off 2024 like we did in the latter half of 2023. Everybody just screw the FSU fan base, and we're going to come spank you for something extremely small. And so Alex Atkins gets hit with a small little suspension along with the program as well. But, I don't want to go into full detail on maybe the situation that went down because I also don't want to just spew off BS that I'm not fully educated on. I don't think we should do that. But just going from what Florida State and Coach Atkins have to deal with, this was due to a recruiting violation here. What it includes, though, from the NCAA is 2 years of probation. Coach Atkins will also be missing the first 3 games of the season for Florida State. There's a lot of other things in here. Maybe I'll share the screen because I don't want to go through and jot down every one of these because we'll be on here till forever long. But I'll bring these up on the screen. Dustin, you're close with all the recruiting stuff here and how that goes and what Atkins actually has to do now. This was NIL related with Hear the Spear. God, just don't screw ourselves here. Damn. Yeah. Just take ourselves down with them. Wow. Woo, goodness gracious. All right, let's reset that. Rising Spear. Rising Spear, kind of close there in similar name, but had them on at the beginning of their time once they launched and got to know their NIL, but more specifically catered since the last 2 years over to other sports, not fully focused on football as they were at the beginning. The Battle's End has kind of taken more of that route for sure. But this is something that also the Rising Spear has to deal with too, getting suspended there. But I'm going to share my screen here, gentlemen. But yeah, Coach Atkins gets hit with it. FSU fan base isn't too happy about it, but it's just kind of is what it is. And the NCAA is the NCAA, and I already know you hate it as much as you do, VZ.
Yeah, it's Stan Wilcox, and I've made my feelings known about Stan Wilcox and just how much he's done to screw Florida State over the last decade since he was the athletic director there, and he's definitely helping his claim here. Really the only big things to note, in my opinion, from this is obviously the suspension of Coach Atkins, and then the loss of 5 total scholarships over the next 2 years. The rest of it doesn't matter too much, in my opinion. Obviously, losing visits, which can factor in, but I think Norvell and this coaching staff have already found ways around that, as we've seen. And I think with this 5 total loss of scholarships, Dustin will probably know more than I do, but it kind of seems like they're just going to do 85 this year and then 80 the next year. And getting a walk-on 4-star quarterback, as we'll talk about later, will help with that.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it goes, but it's you can kind of break it up however you want. You can do 1 this year and then 4 next year, or however you get it to 5 over these 2 years. I'm sure Florida State, the numbers, they always find a way to work themselves out. So not too worried about that. There will still be some attrition from Florida State's roster following spring. As you guys said, the big thing here is the suspension for Coach Atkins. I think luckily for Florida State, those first 3 games, you're going to be playing Georgia Tech in that Ireland matchup. and then coming home to Tallahassee to face Memphis and Boston College. So Florida State hopefully should be able to handle those 3 games without him. And you do have a pretty veteran group of offensive linemen coming back, a lot of guys that have played a lot of football at FSU. One thing I am still trying to figure out is if Florida State's going to be able to promote another coach to an on-field position in Coach Atkins' absence. And, right now it seems like that would be Gabe Fertitta, FSU's senior offensive analyst, and someone that has a ton of experience working with the offensive line and has worked hand in hand with Coach Atkins for the last 2 years, now going into year 3. So still trying to figure out if, he can take over in that place when Atkins is not around during those 3 games. But that's something that's still up in the air at this point.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into with Cooper. We'll talk about him. Let's just tie him in now with that. Cooper Williams also in this role of where Gabe was, of that analyst role on the offensive line, coaching with Coach Atkins, someone that was very hands-on.
He was a graduate assistant.
Yeah, GA has moved on to the SEC and is going to get a bigger, a role there in the SEC with Missouri. So wish him the best of luck. Got to know him too during his time at Florida State. Had a few luncheons with him and sat at the table and got to know him, his family, and everything. And obviously was doing a really good job with Atkins. But Gabe too, as a coach, well respected across that whole entire offensive line, everywhere. That program with the players too. That's who I would highly expect, just depending, like Dustin said, who steps up, what can they promote going into those first 3 games. But Gabe is someone that's been around with these guys, has helped recruit everything imaginable. So I feel confident that, smaller opponents, to start the season, I guess you can say, kind of, there's definitely going to be a few challenges in those. Definitely missing your guy with Atkins, but if you want somebody that's been around for a long while and understands what Atkins wants, this is where Fertitta comes in, and it helps a ton.
Yeah, the good thing is he's been around the program now for so long that he's very familiar with not only the players, but the coaching staff as well. But in the end, it just sucks to see Florida State and Alex Atkins hit for these penalties. This violation originally occurred back in April of 2022. And it's obviously, you can read the report. I think everyone can read between the lines that this is clearly about Georgia offensive line transfer Amarius Mims, who hit the portal, came to Tallahassee for an official visit. There was a report from another outlet that went out that he had committed to Florida State at the time. And then it came out that he had not committed, ended up leaving Florida State and then transferred or stayed with Georgia in the end. But, for reading this NCAA report, and all Coach Atkins did was drive him to the NIL meeting. It doesn't say that he went into the meeting, doesn't say that he was a participant in the meeting at all. And this was at a point where really the NCAA hadn't established very many rules around NIL and those type of ventures.
They still haven't.
To retroactively go back and punish Florida State for something that happened almost 2 years ago. And then where's Amarius Mims now? He declared for the NFL draft at the end of December. So, who at the end of the day, who are we hurting? We're hurting Florida State 2 years later. And Rising Spear, as you kind of mentioned at the beginning of this, Logan, they don't even really work with football athletes anymore. They moved on to other sports. The Battle's End has taken over most of the football NIL dealings at Florida State. So at the end of the day, you're hurting athletes that already aren't getting a ton of NIL opportunities. Those softball, baseball, volleyball, soccer, women's basketball, men's basketball. Yeah. Those are the people that got hurt.
That's what I was about to say. Is you're really hurting the other athletes at Florida State more than you're hurting the football team that committed this. It's so minor of an infraction that I'm surprised they're even getting hit for it. And it's not like this doesn't happen everywhere else. Surely every other school has done something like this. And Florida State's the one that gets slapped on the wrist for it, which is just absurd. I hate that the NCAA is going out with this last little whimper, taking it out on Florida State, but the NCAA is going to NCAA, and I can't wait for them to not exist anymore.
Then who do we think talked?
Georgia.
Mm-hmm. All that playing nice between Kirby Smart at the Orange Bowl. Man's a snake.
A little sly mother. You know what? He's a sly man. Yeah, and look at who just recently won the national championship. Hey, you can do all that, cheat your way through some games, and
And the NCAA hasn't even penalized Michigan yet. It's all the Big Ten that's handed down those penalties. It hasn't been the NCAA, so it's just a very unserious organization, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I can't wait for that day when it crumbles. I think everyone
can't
will
wait.
celebrate.
Cannot wait.
We won't be the only fan base to celebrate, but man, it's just falling apart and making themselves look more embarrassing year by year and season by season. So
and that's why I wonder, if FSU, could they threaten a lawsuit over these penalties? And we've already seen the NCAA before. Whenever someone threatens to take them to court, they just bypass it like a turnstile.
Yeah, maybe if Florida State hadn't already agreed to these penalties, like this wasn't something that just got dropped on Florida State out of nowhere. You could tell that these were negotiated and been brought down from both sides. So I think what we've got is what we've got.
Let's jump into some good news. We're going to just go on a roller coaster ride here and talk about Darrell Jackson real quick. Announced earlier today that he signed with the Battle's End. The former Miami defensive tackle transfer is going to be playing for this 2024 season. Only got to see him in that bowl game against Georgia. Not taking anything from that game whatsoever. We're getting his full debut this upcoming season in Garnet and Gold, but that's a big get for Florida State. They need him coming back no matter what. Kind of was in the chatter group of maybe potentially entering that transfer portal or maybe looking elsewhere, all that kind of stuff. But him and Joshua Farmer will be a big unit to have on the inside of that interior there, those two being very close with one another. But D-Jax, I'm really excited to have him. We heard a lot. We heard from Braden Fisk last week, guys. He thinks very highly of him and the amount of power and the things that we've seen at practice, Dustin. You've seen more of it. He's got that extra gear, and that's something Florida State needs whenever you're losing out on Fabian Lovett. A handful of other guys, and also Braden Fisk, those two guys who made an impact this season.
He's got a ton of potential. I mean, you could see it throughout the season when he wasn't able to get out there on game days, but still, just going hard in practice throughout the year. And, finally got to see him in that Orange Bowl. A little bit unfair since he wasn't able to get any reps under his belt, and then bang, just gets tossed out there in the Orange Bowl against Georgia. His first start at Florida State, his first appearance. And, he had some really positive moments, also some not so positive moments, but I think there's still a ton, him coming back now to have another offseason in Tallahassee, go through spring practice, and actually know going into fall camp that he's eligible and able to play a big role. It's going to be huge. And he's going to be someone that's going to be expected, I would assume, to play a starting role at FSU. I think he's got the potential to make it to the NFL if he can just become more consistent of a player down to down. But I do think it's big for Florida State to retain him because obviously, with the rumblings over the last year or so, he's been a little bit of a wild card. There have been some times, we thought he might end up entering the transfer portal, but then he ultimately remained at Florida State. And we haven't heard from Joshua Farmer just yet, but I would assume with Darrell Jackson back in the fold, it kind of feels like those two guys are tied together. So I would imagine we'll get a Farmer announcement here in the near future.
I'm looking forward to seeing Jackson play with the full defense around him. Like you said, in the Orange Bowl, he had Pat Payton and he had Kalen DeLoach, Fentrell Cypress, and that was about it for
Malcolm Ray.
Like I said, that's about it for normal Florida State rotation players. So I'm looking forward to seeing him with a full defense with good linebackers behind him, a good secondary behind him, and a full defensive line rotation. Also, completely unrelated, I cannot believe how many different weird numbers he's been through. He started at 92 in Maryland, perfectly fine defensive lineman number. Is now in 6 and was 14 this past season. He was also 6 at Miami. So I don't know what number he actually likes, but it's just weird to see a defensive lineman wearing number 6. I can't lie.
Switch it up, but it used to be Briggs.
Yeah, but it's like,
it's an interesting number. It's an interesting number. Maybe we can get him on and we can start figuring out a good number for him. What do you think? What do you think he should be at? If Malcolm Ray, maybe 99?
Yeah, just keep the D tackles in those 90s. It just makes the most sense.
I like the 90s. I do like that too.
Lovett and 0 was Lovett and 0 was already obscure, and then now seeing 6 is just also Marvin Wilson wearing 21. And this is a weird tangent.
that by far having him and then having Logan Tyler wear 21, it was just a wild just thinking of what are we doing here? What is happening?
Weird tangent, I know, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. I still haven't fully gone that way yet with the smaller numbers. Definitely, I can understand if we're on the edge and you got 6, or you're like Jared Verse, you got 5. But if you're on the interior defensive line, I like those 90s numbers for sure. But I'd go with 99 there for Djax if he decides to switch some things up. Speaking of Dennis Briggs, though, he has entered the transfer portal. That's someone that Florida State has had for a very long time, veteran. If you go back to the COVID year too, ended up opting out, was taking care of his family, was having a baby, and then actually came back latter half in that season and showed up and played well for Florida State. This is a guy that I've always thought highly of him. Just a really, really good person to be around. And just as a player too, he's someone that you can have as a really good, solid depth piece. And, injuries kind of delayed him and maybe some progress and growth for him as a player, but he ends up hitting the transfer portal. And personally, I'm wishing him the best of luck. But you don't want to lose kind of the depth there, defensive tackle. But I think Florida State's working on trying to get that fixed in that hole.
Dennis Briggs was Florida State's longest tenured player. He'd been with this program since 2018. Played under former head coach Willie Taggart, stuck around whenever Mike Norvell arrived in Tallahassee. Someone that bounced between defensive end and the interior during his time with the program. Always a solid part of the rotation for Florida State. And like you said, Logan, injuries just really seemed to tap his potential. You think back to that 2021 game against Louisville, he suffered a season-ending leg injury, and ever since then just hasn't had quite the same amount of burst. But, still has always been solid presence in the lineup, a good guy in the locker room for Florida State, off the field. So, a bit of an underrated loss here with him moving on. But, there's so much talent on this interior coming back for Florida State and coming in for Florida State in 2024. I don't think that there's necessarily a guaranteed established role for Dennis Briggs. And, he's going to look for somewhere else where he can take on an immediate starting role for his final season of eligibility.
I can't believe he still has eligibility. He's been playing since I was in college, and I graduated college 5 years ago.
Yeah, he's been playing since I was in college.
So,
damn,
this is going to sound harsh, but just go work insurance or something, man. It's time. It's been a long time.
Whoa.
That's messed up. You got to take advantage of the NIL opportunities while you're there, especially nowadays. Like, if you're not someone who's guaranteed to go to the NFL, then you need to take advantage of it as much as possible while you're in college. And, I don't think it's guaranteed just yet that Briggs is going to be able to play in 2024. He's working through that eligibility process, similar to what we saw with Dimitri Emmanuel last year to get a 7th year of eligibility. And that would be, just like I mentioned a second ago, but for that injury suffered in 2021, which was before it was the 4th game of the season. So, the 4-game redshirt rule is basically trying to apply for an injury redshirt, a medical redshirt for that season to play again. But, I think you should go get that opportunity while it's still on the table.
One player that is going to end up going back to their old school is Gilbert Edmond, former South Carolina defensive end, transferred to Florida State. AA. What'd you say?
Sent him back down to AA. He got called up to the majors for 1 year, got sent back down.
Yeah, tough. Back down minors. Yep. But yeah, Gilbert Edmond played for a year at Florida State, defensive end, is now heading back to play for South Carolina. I don't think this was a major shock for me just because of what Florida State's bringing in and what he would have to compete once again with and or earning playing time. And that's probably something he was trying to get into getting if he were to actually have some really significant progress. And maybe Florida State and Coach JP and, Florida State, Odell didn't see that progress that they were initially thinking or expecting out of Gilbert and, what they were able to do in the transfer portal already in that defensive end room. With a couple of guys, and it's not too much of a shock here, but Gilbert Edmond heading back to his old squad. And there's, like I said, a handful of guys that are coming in to play at that position. A few of them that we talked about in our previous episode, and I'm going to have to say their names again, and it's going to be really, really rough on me because I have not practiced one whatsoever. But West Virginia defensive end transfer Tommy Wah,
No.
Garaway,
No.
and
Tomiwe, Duro Jaye.
Yeah, those two guys are coming in.
You should have waited. I was going to bring their names up, so you should have waited.
No, I got to keep going with it. I can't be a sissy. Like, I can't do it. You just got to go.
You also can't come in and just botch it.
I can. I'm learning. I'm just learning. Okay. But yeah, Gil Redmond back to South Carolina. Not a crazy shock with what Florida State has coming in.
Don't think it's a big loss at all. There was a really big drop-off last year whenever Florida State had to go to the defensive ends beyond Patrick Payton and Jared Verse. And with Gilbert Edmond only having 1 year of eligibility remaining, I think it made a lot of sense for FSU to go out there and look for upgrades that could, make really big impacts in 2024. And, while they missed some in the portal early on, I think these 3 guys that they ended up with are going to be huge additions to that rotation alongside, Peyton, and you still have Byron Turner Jr. there and some other guys that are going to be competing for spots. But, obviously Marvin Jones Jr., then you've got Tomiwe Durojaye and also Sione Lolo Haya. So some really big additions for Florida State on the outside. And some, look at Sione, he's coming in more experienced, but then a guy like Tomiwe, a lot more potential and someone that Florida State can coach up into a really good player.
No comment. Just glad they've gotten some depth in there.
There you go.
You want to pronounce your name? Take a shot.
Nope. I got DJ. That's it for right now.
Yeah, I don't want to see you laughing then, Austin.
I just haven't practiced.
Okay. See, there we go. But yeah, that's going to do it there for some kind of the quick hitters. We're going to jump into some recruiting now. Well, we could, depends. So let's just name the Battle's End guys that are coming back and have signed there and yada, yada, yada. Definitely some names worth mentioning. Fintrell Cypress, Daniel Lyons, KJ Sampson, 2 defensive line guys there getting signed with the Battle's End, much needed with some depth going into next year. Vondravius Jacobs. Van Dravius. Jabril Rawls, Charles Lester, Landon Thomas, and Marvin Jones Jr. Marvin Jones Jr. is someone that we should have mentioned. There's a lot of guys that Florida State's going to be having in that defensive end room that is going to be competing for those starting spots outside of Pat Payton that's returning. But what names stand out to you guys the most here? Ventrell.
Thought that Cypress.
Honestly, none of them. I thought all these guys would pretty much be back for the most part.
Thought that silence was pretty loud.
That's messed up.
I guess maybe Ventrell, I could have seen him deciding maybe to hit the portal one more time, but I think him coming back to FSU, to have another veteran cornerback in there. And you look at that cornerback room, there's some talent and experience at the top, and then a lot of promising young potential there at the bottom, where if those guys can grow under the coaching of Pat Surtain, it's going to be getting real scary in Tallahassee on the outside.
Yeah, I thought Ventrell was overly hated last year. He was nowhere near as bad as the fans thought he was. He was a very solid corner. I think one more year work under Coach Surtain is going to do him a lot of justice.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into some recruiting, gentlemen, and this is going to lead us into our topic here, the title, talking about Alabama and the surplus of guys coming over to Florida State. But let's start off with some more recent news. As of today, Florida State landed a 4-star quarterback, and this one's a little interesting here because there's more to it. Actually competed at the Elite 11, and something, those are some top-tier quarterbacks. Just don't want to just run by that easily. Those are some top-tier quarterbacks across the country that get invited to that competition. But D'Lo, maybe run us through a few things of what Florida State's getting here with Trevor Jackson and maybe why it was so late in the recruiting process here for Jackson to actually be able to come to Florida State with the class kind of wrapped up.
Yeah, it's really interesting. This one kind of came a little bit out of left field. Florida State obviously already holding a quarterback signee in the 2024 class, and Luke Kromenhoek, who, one of the top prep signal callers available and someone that Florida State has wanted to officially get in the fold for a very long time. But then you look at Trevor Jackson, this is a guy, a developmental prospect, coming into Florida State, someone where there's a lot of potential. And I think when you look at this room, you've had obviously Jordan Travis graduated, but Tate Rodemaker transferred. You had AJ Duffy transfer. And, recently within the past 2 seasons, you've also had Chubba Purdy depart from the roster. So Florida State, they've lost a couple of numbers over the years in that quarterback room. And, now going into this 2024 season, only 3 guys on scholarship in DJU, Brock Glenn, and Luke Kromenhag. So you get a really interesting quarterback addition in Trevor Jackson, someone that you can groom over the years. And, you look at what Mike Norvell and Tony Tokars were able to do with Jordan Travis. Like Travis, Jackson is someone that begins his college career pretty raw as a quarterback, but if he is able to grow and develop and mature, he could turn into a very interesting player, in a couple of seasons. Like you mentioned, Logan, participated at the Elite 11, actually won the Rail Shot Challenge up there at that competition between other top prep quarterbacks, which is kind of like an accuracy challenge of sorts. So it's going to be interesting now to see him at Florida State, and it seems like he's going to be available to start practicing with the team, now and hit the ground running in the off season and be there for spring practice.
A couple of big time offers. I know I don't really talk about recruiting a lot, but I mean, he has offers from Texas A&M, Penn State, Missouri, Ole Miss, Pitt. Like, it's not like it's some kid that only had some lower tier offers and decided to stay close to home. He's talented quarterback.
Yeah, he was actually committed to Ole Miss for a couple of months before backing off that pledge in the fall.
Yeah, not only that, Florida State continues to stay hot. Someone in the 2025 class that big flip here for Florida State in a position.
Huge
position of need. Extremely talented Florida State lands a commitment. Big flip. Javion Hilson, a 4-star defensive end. D-Lou, this is a nice pickup here. Obviously, one of the top edge players in the country. I'm going to bring up his profile here from 247 Sports, but on the composite, a top 10 edge rusher, just specifically from 247 itself, a top 5 edge rusher, number 4 in the country, top 50 player. Man, I thought this was massive the other day for Florida State. And like I was saying earlier, a position where you want to kind of build your own, and just to have this recruit. And, I think immediately too, FSU Twitter is like, let's just wait till we get the signing day and make sure Florida State brings them in. I understand that. And I'm right there with you. That's how, the staff should be held to that standard, because we've seen some misses here as of late, specifically in this room. But for right now, if Florida State can hold on to this cat, this is a really special player that they'd be bringing into their edge rusher room.
I'm real excited about this one. Javion Hilson would be the top-ranked high school edge recruit that Florida State has signed since Mike Norvell and this coaching staff arrived in Tallahassee. They're now going into their 5th recruiting cycle. And they've had some guys committed in the past that have flipped, at the last second. But, Hilson, a very, very impressive prospect, 6'4", about 225 pounds. Actually, he was at Florida State a couple of times last year. I believe it was either January or at some point in the spring last year, whenever he visited. And I remember him walking in, and we were just like, man, that's a big kid. And at the time, he was just a rising junior. So, to have another year under his belt before he actually moves to the college level, kid's just going to keep getting better. And he's coming off a season. Yeah, he's coming off a season where he had 94 tackles, 27 tackles for loss, 14 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and 2 pass deflections. And his performance has been crucial in Coco winning now 2 consecutive state championships. And Florida State, their last 2 commitments now in this 2025 class. You've got Javion Hilson there at defensive end. Then you also had Solomon Thomas back in December, the 4-star offensive lineman. And championships are won, up front. And Florida State, 2 big additions in the trenches early on in this 2025 recruiting cycle.
Super excited for that kid. I highly suggest go watching some film of him too. But man, just imagine what Storms can do with him as well once he arrives. He's just already got the stature itself, just genetics, great genetics. But man, I know those kind of caliber players are what Coach Storms is kind of already licking his chops for, getting him inside and getting working in that weight room and get them on the nutrition plan. And then let's jump into a kind of handful. I'm just going to start firing these guys off just because that's what Florida State's been doing right now in the transfer portal. Outside of a Florida offensive line transfer, Richie Leonard, Florida State brought in multiple other Alabama players. We talked about a ton of them last week, but we'll start off with Terrence Ferguson, the second, an Alabama offensive lineman that Florida State's going to be bringing in, along with a running back with Roydell Williams, someone that played a lot of snaps for Alabama, physical runner. We'll talk more about him in just a second, and also to a position of need with Sean Murphy, Alabama linebacker transfer, someone that hasn't had a whole ton of experience on the field, but was expected to take that next step for Alabama and see a lot of playing time in 2024. But start off with Terrence. We'll kind of go from there, and then we'll give our thoughts on a few of these guys at Florida State doing a really good job. All SEC guys kind of flowing over here to Tallahassee, but specifically Tuscaloosa to Tallahassee.
Yeah, Ferguson, a big one, a guy with a ton of potential, hasn't played a ton of snaps just yet, but was starting to kind of get over that hurdle at Alabama, appeared in 12 total games, had his first career start during the 2023 season. It seems like coming in, he's someone that has the versatility to play either of those guard spots, could maybe get some playing time there at center. And, with Florida State losing Dimitri Emmanuel and Casey Roddick, they're going to need some guys to step into that interior and soak up some time immediately. I would assume Terrence Ferguson is going to be someone right there in that competition for one of the starting guard spots. But, you can see right here on the screen, 6'4", 322 pounds, highly regarded coming out of high school. Florida State recruited him heavily when he was at the prep level. He ended up choosing the Crimson Tide, but, like we've seen with some of these other transfer recruitments, Marvin Jones Jr., Jalen Brown, Earl Little, Florida State establishing that relationship in high school. And when these guys hit the transfer portal, the Seminoles are almost a natural fit with the connection that was already previously established.
You can tell Florida State placed an emphasis on guard recruiting this portal cycle. The really only tackle they went after was Carter Smith, who was obviously a high-level, high-potential starter at tackle. To me, if they couldn't get a clear upgraded tackle, they weren't going to chase it. And you can bring two guys in Leonard and Ferguson that can, at the very least, give you good, solid depth at guard. And that's something Florida State kind of struggled with last year, is a revolving door between Keandre Jones, Casey Roddick, Meach, just so many different guys rotating in and out with injury and whatever else. So good to keep building up that depth, especially with an Alabama guy. Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, I was thinking about it earlier, actually. And to me, bringing in this insurance at guard with Ferguson and also Richie Leonard, it helps Florida State keep Darius Washington at left tackle, in my opinion, because Ferguson has the potential to play center. Leonard can slide into that center role as well if needed. So if there is ever a time where Maurice Smith goes down, you've got one of those two guys that you can slide over, and then you can keep Darius out there, protecting DJU's blind side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of protection coming for DJU, and Florida State, depending on when these guys enter the transfer portal, there's a lot of advertising there saying, hey, we're going to protect you, man. And that's something that where Florida State's building that speed and the skills room right now, and they've done that, and a lot of speed, and having as much room and time for DJ going into this next season is going to be huge. So loading up on that offensive line is big. And also, too, why not we add more talent into that running back room, which Coach Yak just seems to be able to always obtain this kind of talent. But, man, it's going to be highly competitive going into this season with Roydell Williams coming in from Alabama, coming in from his class previously, a top 10 running back in the country. And you're adding that now and to Florida State's stacked running back room with a lot of some proven talent. Absolutely. You've got LT, you've got Keziah Holmes, but then you've also got some youngsters in there, and you've got a Cam Davis. There's some guys even behind him too that come in his class as well, that there's just so many different kind of styles of talent. But Roydell Williams is coming in and is buying into himself. He's investing into himself to find playing time in Florida State's offense.
And look where he went to high school at.
Hueytown.
Who else went there?
Some good Florida State play. Really good Florida State player played there. I wonder who that was.
One pretty good one. I think his name started with Jameis and ended with Winston. But Roydell Williams, someone that has a lot of experience from his 4 years at Alabama, appeared in 45 games, won a national championship during his first year in Tuscaloosa. And he was mainly, a reserve backup type guy. This past season started getting more into the rotation, kind of a two-headed attack there, where he ended up with 560 yards and 5 touchdowns on 111 carries. And, he's not someone that's going to come in and necessarily take the top off the defense, but a very physical runner between the tackles, a bruiser that can go out there and, just flat out run you over. And I think he adds a different flavor to Florida State's offense, a little bit Trey Benson-esque, Trey Benson light maybe coming in. And with him moving on, I think it's a nice add with Williams coming in alongside Lawrence Toafili and Kysaiah Holmes and some of the other really promising young running backs in that room.
I really like this running back room. There's so many different flavors that you can bring between Roydell, Cam, Toafili, Holmes. So many different options that Norvell's going to roll out there. And I've said it a bunch of times, if there's anyone I trust with running back evaluations, it's Coach Norvell. So I expect him to get the best out of Roydell Williams.
Mm-hmm. Florida State is going to bring over a Gator too, someone that played a lot of snaps on that offensive line. Played 12 games, I believe, right, D-Lou? And 755 snaps, a team high there on the offensive line. But this is Richie Leonard. He's going to come in and help that interior offensive line as well. Thoughts on Richie coming over? And also was a hilarious kind of day there from some of his former teammates, not being a big fan of him going over to the Florida State side and going to a rival. One of his teammates not happy whatsoever. But Richie's a Seminole. He wants to be a winner, so he's coming to Tallahassee.
You kind of nailed it. Richie Leonard coming into Florida State after starting all 12 games for UF in 2023 at left guard and played a team high 755 snaps. So someone that was extremely reliable for the Gators throughout last season. And now transferring to Florida State so he can hopefully be on the winning side of this rivalry during his final season of collegiate eligibility. But, someone who's a little bit sawed off, 6'2". You got it right there. I think he was listed on UF's roster at either like 322 pounds or something like that, but pretty good size and someone with a lot of experience. And, he's also right there in that interior battle now with Terrence Ferguson. And you've also got Keandre Jones in the mix there, a guy coming back for Florida State in 2024. So some really quality guards on this roster. I think you're going to see another kind of offensive line by committee where Florida State doesn't necessarily have 5 starting offensive linemen, but they've got 6, 7, 8 guys that contribute and earn starts throughout the season.
He wanted to experience what winning's like. Can't blame him. Get out of Hawktown, go someplace and have some success. I love it.
Yep. And then now a big one here too. And for a position of need, Sean Murphy, Alabama transfer linebacker. As I was saying earlier, didn't see a lot of playing time, was expected to take that next step. And I'll be honest with you, Florida State, if Nick Saban is recruiting a linebacker very hard and wants him in his program and ends up committing and end up playing for Alabama, I'll take him. Go and give me him. Bring him over here, please. And definitely for Florida State, where it's very thin there and doesn't have a whole ton of, doesn't have a lot of experience. And that's something Murphy might not have at that level as well. But someone, if Randy Shannon is able to do a good job of developing this offseason, should be able to see a potential starting role and what Florida State's trying to do in that linebacker room. But was a former top 15 linebacker. 247 Sports had him as a top 5 linebacker in his class coming in high school. But 6'2", 225, something you need whenever we were talking about earlier, losing Tatum Bethune, Kalen DeLoach. They've got to find some guys in here and to beef up that rim.
Yeah, didn't play a ton at Alabama, but I mean, honestly, a stacked linebacker room over there in Tuscaloosa. And this guy coming to Tallahassee, instantly going to be able to step into that rotation, I think. DJ Lundy coming back, but outside of that, the rest of that room, relatively unproven. And you get a top 100 talent like Sean Murphy, and we've seen Randy Shannon develop, Kalen DeLoach, Tatum Bethune, also the improvements that DJ Lundy has made over the last couple of years. So, I mean, recruiting might not be his strongest suit in Tallahassee, but development certainly has been one. I think, giving him someone with Sean Murphy's talent, it's going to be a positive for Florida State. Being able to go through spring practice and the offseason conditioning program in Tallahassee is going to be crucial. And, we'll see what he looks like out there in March when spring practice rolls around, but a ton of potential to step in and immediately play a huge role.
You can make the argument he's instantly the most talented linebacker in that room right now. I think I'd still like for Florida State to go out and get a guy that's got more experience playing, but at least this raises the talent level in that room, which was absolutely needed.
And if he reaches that potential, his senior year of high school, he actually won the Butkus Award winner among high school prospects, which that basically means he was the most talented linebacker in America in that 2022 class. But he had 113 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, and a pair of interceptions as a senior, while earning Under Armour All-American honors. So another guy who you're adding who maybe hasn't produced a ton yet at the college level, but showed a ton of potential and talent previously in their careers, and Florida State hoping to help them make that next step and break out in Tallahassee.
Well, let's jump into some basketball here. I think that wraps up football side of things. Before we jump into basketball, I think we're nearing like 65, 70 something likes. If you want to hit the like button, we definitely appreciate it a ton, as a few of our commentators in here. Shout out to Robert in here asking for you guys to hit the like button. It helps go out to more FSU fans. If you're new here, we go live every Wednesday evening, usually at 7, but we're going an hour early because VZ has basketball here that's really actually about to start right now when they tip off against Miami. So, but yeah, hit the like button. Deeply appreciate everybody coming on here and hanging out with us. But yeah, VZ, real quick, Miami, Florida State going on right now as we speak. What should we expect? And if Florida State gets this win, what does it do?
Let's address the second question first. Miami's kind of on a downward trend. They've lost 2 of their last 3, including just a brutal loss to Louisville at home last week. Louisville hadn't won a road ACC game in 2 years, so to go into Coral Gables and pick up that win was definitely a surprise. They've lost to Wake Forest and then struggled against Virginia Tech this past weekend. But it matters because of who's on that other sideline, and it's Matthew Cleveland, who last time these two teams were playing in the Watsco Center, Matthew Cleveland hit a buzzer beater from 27 feet, and it was Miami's last loss before they went to the Final Four. So this matters a lot for both teams. I really wish Cameron Fletcher was playing because he was the player that objected Cleveland going to Miami the most, and I'm sure it would have been a little bit chippy if he was playing. But either way, it's going to be a very interesting game. 2 very stylistically different teams. Miami wants to get up and down the floor, no free throws on either side. They shoot a ton of threes and they make them. They're shooting about 40% from 3 as a team between Cleveland, Poplar, and Nigel Pack. They're all 42, 43, 44% from 3. And then you have Florida State, who just wants to cause so much chaos defensively with their length and athleticism. Florida State goes 11 deep, and Miami plays 6 players at the most times. So 2 very, very different teams, but it should be a very entertaining basketball game. It's 5-5 early on right now, and I'm really looking forward to this one. There's very few wins I want more on the schedule than to beat Miami.
Florida State and Miami on the basketball court doesn't always feel like a rivalry. I think this time around it 100% does, with Matthew Cleveland now being on the other side.
I'm waiting for somebody to put Cleveland on his ass. I'm waiting for it to happen because it's going to happen at some point. I'm just waiting for when that moment's actually going to be. And for Whit, who was asking about my name tag earlier, I think all Florida State fans know that FFM one. Carry that same math over to the next one. The MC is just Matthew Cleveland.
Oh, wow.
Damn. Whew, that's pretty rough here. Goodness gracious. And for context for the people listening, that's what Austin's name is labeled here on our StreamYard for the viewers that are watching across Facebook, YouTube, everything. So,
which if you're just listening, hop on the YouTube.
What's it mean?
Yeah.
I'm just
F Miami, FF Miami.
And then
Matthew Cleveland, FF Matthew Cleveland.
Damn, that's tough. That's tough. It's okay, though. It's part of the rivalry. If it sparks it up even more, like Dustin said, sign me up. Let's go. Let's have some fun. But, yeah, then they'll play Clemson on Saturday, and then have another game before we even go live again.
Clemson's all of a sudden fall off a cliff. They ran through non-conference play. They were up to like top 15 ranking, and now I think they're 1-4 in ACC play. So really falling off the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you mentioned, Austin, but Florida State already more wins than last season. So no matter what happens here for the rest of the campaign, they could lose out, and it's already been a more successful year than last year. I don't think they're going to lose out, but
I don't think so either. You play Louisville in a couple of weeks. You still have games. You still have another game against Georgia Tech. I've said all year it's a 500 basketball team, and they're playing a little bit better than that right now. If they can pick up a couple wins over these next couple of weeks, I've said it a couple of times, these next 4 games between Miami, Clemson, Syracuse, UNC, you go 2-2 there, I think you're setting yourself up really, really well the rest of the season, because the ACC is starting to fall off from where some people thought they were, which I didn't even think they were that good of a conference to begin with. They're starting to show their true colors recently.
Well, we need to wrap this up so then VZ can get over to Twitter land and give us live updates. And then we can also have a nice lengthy recap afterward as well. So everybody, I know this was kind of a more quicker episode this week, but nice to kind of get in here, get the news out to you guys. We'll be back live next Wednesday. Hopefully we'll be bringing on another guest. We're going to try to do that frequently throughout this off season. So it might be week on, week off, but this one actually held a lot of news that we need to go through. So that's why didn't bring on a guest this week, but looking forward to hopefully grabbing another one, hopefully a recent Noel that is right now moving on and getting ready to the next level. So keep an eye out for that. Before you leave, though, hit that like button. I think we got over 200 people on YouTube or so hanging out with us this evening. So deeply appreciate that. I was getting close to 300 earlier. So appreciate everybody hanging out. If you hit that like before you leave, it helps to go to more FSU fans and helps us get these videos out more to y'all on a consistent basis. But yeah, make sure you subscribe. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. Hit that like button, subscribe. We'll be back here next Wednesday at 7 p.m. I appreciate everybody listening, and we'll see you guys in 7 days. See you. Peace.
Same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to sell word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to sell word. 17.5, same color t-shirt. Mama told me not to sell word. 17.